Magic, white and black, the science of finite and infinite life. Thus, we see that nothing will ever change or be transformed except by the influence of another principle. A natural product grows by the influence of natural principles, and that which is divine in man by the influence of the divine, while that which is devilish in man will grow by the aid of the devil. All things are made of will and thought, and therefore thought and will can act even upon corporeal substances. Anything a person touches receives a part of his own spirit. A lock of hair, a piece of clothing, the handwriting of a person or any article he may have touched, handled or worn may indicate to an intuitive individual that person's state of health, his physical, emotional, intellectual and moral attributes and qualifications. The picture of a murderer may be impressed on the retina of his victim and in some instances be reproduced by means of photography. But it is surely impressed on all the surroundings of the place where the deed occurred, and can there be detected by the psychometer, who may thus come en rapport with the criminal, and even follow the events of his life after he has left that locality, and hunt him down just as the bloodhound traces the steps of a fugitive. This tendency of the astral light to inhere in material bodies gives amulets their power and invests keepsakes and relics with certain occult properties. A ring, a lock of hair, or a letter from a friend may not only conjure up that friend's citure in a person's memory, but bring him en rapport with a peculiar mental state of which that person was or is a representation. Why do people put so much value upon the keepsakes received from a friend that they often dawdle away their time in playing with them? Is it that their memory is so weak as to require such a stimulus? Or is there something of that friend about them which the soul feels and perceives, but which cannot be recognized externally? If you wish to forget a person, or free yourself from his magnetic attraction, part from everything that reminds you of him. Articles belonging to a person may bring us in sympathy with that person, although the fact may not come to our consciousness, and this circumstance is sometimes used for purposes of black magic. The existence of a power by which a disease may be transferred upon a healthy person, even in non-contagious cases, by means of some article belonging to the sick person, is generally believed in by the people in Eastern countries. It must, however, be remembered that in making such experiments, the success depends on the amount of faith which the magician can employ. Without faith, nothing can be accomplished, but faith means will without any doubt, such as is attained by experience. As every form is the representation of a certain mental state, every substance has its sympathies and its antipathies. The lodestone attracts iron, and iron attracts the oxygen of the air. Hygroscope. Bodies attract water. Some substances change their color under certain colored rays, others remain unaffected, etc. The ancients attributed certain virtues to certain precious stones and imagined that the garnet was conducive to joy, the chalcedony to courage, the topaz promoting chastity, the amethyst assisting reason, and the sapphire intuition. A spiritual force to be effective requires a sensitive object to act upon. But every spiritual or any other force can only come to the cognizance of him who is receptive for it. If a person cannot feel the occult influences of nature, it does not necessarily follow that they do not exist, and that there may not be others who may be able to perceive them because their impressional capacities are greater. Only the ignorant man believes that he knows everything. What is really known is only like a grain of sand on the shore of the ocean in comparison to what is still unknown. Physiologists know that certain plants and chemicals have certain powers, and to a certain extent they explain their secondary effects. They know that digitalis decreases the quickness of the pulse by paralyzing the heart, that belladonna dilates the pupil by paralyzing the muscular fibers of the iris, that opium in small doses produces sleep by causing anemia of the brain, while large doses produce coma by causing congestion. But why these substances have such effects, or why a chemical compound of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon and hydrogen may be exceedingly poisonous in one chemical combination, While the same substances, if combined in a different stoichiometrical proportion, may be used as food, neither chemistry nor physiology can tell us at present. If we, however, look upon all forms as symbols of mental states, it will not be more difficult to imagine why strychnine is poisonous than why hate can kill or fear paralyze the heart. If all things are made of imagination and will, then surely drugs are the same. And by giving drug A to a patient, we merely induce a corresponding activity in his will and act upon the imagination of his nature. The fact that the patient is not himself conscious of it does not change the matter. There are many processes going on in his system of which he has no knowledge. We therefore see that even the most rabid anti-mind curer and drug doctor acts after all himself upon the mind of the patient. The power to receive, transform and evolve thoughts is the power of imagination. If an idea enters into the mind seeks to clothe it into a form, and this power may be exercised independently of any active application of the will. Imagination is, therefore, an active power, and it forms the basis of all artistic and magical operations. Art and magic are closely related together. Both give objective form to subjective ideas. The artist exercises this power when he mentally projects the picture formed in his mind upon the canvas and chains it there by the use of his pencil or brush. The sculptor shapes the picture of a form on his mind and embodies it in the marble. He then employs mechanical force to free the ideal from all irregularities and resurrects it from the tomb out of which it may rise as a materialization of thought. The magician forms an image on his mind and makes it perceptible to others by projecting it into their mental spheres. By this law, many of the feats performed by Indian forkers may be explained. They may cause tigers and elephants or anything else appear before a multitude by merely forming the images of such things in the sphere of their mind. And as that sphere extends through space, they may locate these images wherever they chose. What the spectators see on such occasions is nothing else but the thoughts of the conjurer, rendered objective and visible by his will. In the case of an artist, mechanical labor executes the work, and the artist will finish his work the sooner the more he works to that end. In the case of a magician, concentration of thought executes his work, and he will succeed the better the more his thought is concentrated upon the work he desires to perform. But the greatest amount of labor will not enable a person who is not an artist to produce a real work of art, and the greatest concentration of thought will not enable a person whose will is not free to perform a true magical feat. As long as the world exists, no man has ever changed an opinion or an idea except by the influx of another idea. Nor has any alchemist ever changed any inferior metal into gold except by the influence of that principle which constitutes gold. Nor has evil ever been transformed into good except through the action of the superior power of good. The processes of nature are alchemical processes and not merely chemical ones, because without the principle of life acting upon the chemical substances of the earth, no growth would result. If the force of attraction and repulsion were entirely equal, everything would be at a standstill. If growth and decay would go hand in hand, nothing could grow, because a cell would begin to decay as soon as it would begin to form. The chemist may take earth and water and air and separate them into their constituent elements and recombine them again, and at the end of his work he will be with his work where he began. But the alchemy of nature takes water and earth and air and infuses into them the fire of life, forming them into trees and producing flowers and fruits. Nature could not give her life-imparting influence to her children if she did not possess it. The chemist who has no life principle at his command cannot perform the wonders of alchemy. Johannes Trithemius says, "The spiritus mundi resembles a breath, appearing at first like a fog, and afterwards condensing like water. This water, akasa, was in the beginning pervaded by the principle of life, and light was awakened in it by the fiat of the eternal spirit. This spirit of light, called the soul of the world, the astral light, is a spiritual substance which can be made visible and tangible by art. It is a substance, but being invisible, we call it spirit. This soul, or corpus, is hidden in the center of everything and can be extracted by means of the spiritual fire in man, which is identical with the universal spiritual fire, the astral light, constituting the essence of nature and containing the images and figures of the universal mind. This light, astral light, resides in the water, akasa, and is hidden as a seed in all things. Everything that originated from the spirit of light is sustained by it, and therefore this spirit is omnipresent. The whole of nature would perish and disappear if it were removed from it. It is the principium of all things.